Welcome then folks to day one of Special Projects pack number 13. The time rolls on and we come back around to another pack again. This is one which, as soon as the car was added to the game, I knew I wanted to do it because the Chevelle, of course, is an icon from Gran Turismo, but it was never in premium form, and I think that's probably one of the main reasons why, unlike some of the other muscle cars like the Challenger and the Camaro, they didn't do a race-modified version. There was no touring car, no race car, so I wanted to make the equivalent to, like the Challenger that we did last month. What would that be like? What would that look like on a Chevelle? So this is a fictional livery that I've done. I wanted it to have that kind of Gran Turismo original looking livery to it, which are usually fairly minimal looking if you check them out, for example in Gran Turismo 6, and I've done 5 different colours of this one. So if you click on the link down below as usual, you can go over to my page, download whichever one you like. I've done red, obviously, yellow, blue, black and silver. So not every possible colour, but those are just the ones which I like the most for the car. As far as the upgrades, again I wanted it to be competitive, in particular against the Challenger. There was the Camaro race car, and I may well do that in a future episode, but for now the Challenger was the main rival, which I wanted this one to have. So being a race car, some of the stuff is pretty obvious. So if we jump first of all to the sports section, you got your stage 1 weight. As far as the club sports, I have bored out the engine, so technically this is not an SS454 anymore. It's more like an SS463 because it's got a bigger cubic inch amount because of the bored out engine. We've got the high compression pistons, stage 2 weight of course, power restrictor and ballast are fitted as well. We've got the fully customised computer, the racing crank, the fully customised diff, the fully customised manual box is the one that I've gone for. I wanted a little bit more of an old school feel, plus it makes the points a bit lower as well. I have increased the rigidity on this one, of course stage 3 weight naturally. As far as the racing stuff, balance tuning on the engine, the race filter, silencer and manifold, pads and discs. I've said it before, but for new people, it doesn't really matter if you go for slotted or drilled, or you could go for ceramics, but they cost more. As far as the clutch, that of course is race spec as well. Race suspension, you could go for the race transmission. Like I said, it does bump up your points a little bit more as well, so that's down to you. I've gone for racing hards because of course that's the standard I go for a racing machine. We've got the steering angle adapter as well for that better turn in on corners. And for the ultimate section, I've just slapped the carbon prop shaft on because why not? It's always an option if you want to do that. Some cars I do, some cars I don't. If I recall correctly, I don't think I've done the wide body on this one, but if you check on the livery, it will tell you. Obviously, if it says wide body, and I may well put up on screen if it has it or not, because I'll double check before the video comes out, but the wide body on this one is fairly subtle anyway. It's more like a dechroming kit, but I don't think it does have it, but you'll see on screen either way. So, as far as the build goes, you can see just under 600 horses, 1275 kilos, definitely still more front bias, but not too ridiculous, and 665 points, which, for a car with that kind of power on racing hards, that's fairly modest, actually, well under 700. So, racing hards fitted. As far as the suspension, I've got it a little bit higher on the front, which if we jump out to the menu, it really doesn't look that way. It basically just evens it out a little bit. So 100 on the rear, 105 on the front, 5 for anti-roll, 20 and 30, so super low on the dampers, and I've made up for that with the springs, so all the way up to 2.95. 3 on camber. For the toe, we've got toe in 10 on the front and in 20 on the rear. So the opposite to what you'd usually expect me to do on the front, but give it a try and see what you think. I quite like it for this car, actually. As far as the diff, I've got triple 10. Won't necessarily be to everyone's taste. And obviously everyone has their own preferences when it comes to the diff, so if you want to change it, of course, that's fine. These are always just canvases, as I always used to say to work from. As far as the transmission, pretty simple one. 320 kilometers an hour is up around 200-ish miles an hour, which is about right for a car like this, I feel. But of course you could adjust that as necessary. We've got 60 kilos of ballast because I wanted it at 1275. I just like that number. It looks good for the car. I've put that all the way to the rear to make it just a little bit closer to a 50-50. No limits on the power restrictor or the ECU. It does have downforce on the front. Of course, if you fit the front chin splitter, or if you just get the design that I've done, it comes with it. I've opted to have it on 0 though, because without having any on the back, it can kind of upset the balance of the car more, which, for example, would make it more like a drift car. So if you've got loads of downforce on the front, not much on the back, then the back end is going to be more loose, and I didn't really want that. So I opted to sacrifice the front downforce just to even it out over the back end. And then as far as the parts over here, you can of course see all the stuff which we've fitted. So with all of that being said, Naturally, all that remains is to, as always, jump out to the track. On this occasion, Laguna Seca seems appropriate for the car to see what it can actually do in practice. Now for this one, my notes were fairly simple, and they're pretty much what you'd expect it to be, with a sub 1300 kilo, nearly 600 horsepower racing car version of the Chevelle. Certain things are kind of a given. So yes, it can spin up its wheels. Yes, it can kick its tail out, and yes, it can be a bit leery. I would say this is probably a touch less forgiving than the Challenger. I think part of the reason is probably the fact that the Chevelle naturally carries its weight a bit higher. It's a bit of a taller car, whereas the Chevelle is a bit more squat and wide, or the Challenger, I should say, is more squat and wide. In terms of using it though, rolling onto the throttle is pretty much the surefire way of making it so much easier to drive. Because if you floor it out of corners, of course it's going to spin up the wheels because it's got that huge V8, about the same size as Abe, and so much torque, a huge amount of torque. So with that in mind, it's going to spin up its wheels. You know, on racing tyres, on sports tyres, on intermediates, it doesn't matter what you've got, it's always going to do that. So if you roll on like 50% throttle, or maybe even sometimes a little bit less, and then really open it up when the car is pointing pretty much in the direction you want it to go, then the rest will pretty much take care of itself. The brakes are good, the handling I would say is pretty good. It's just that rampant wheel spin that power can produce if you don't, you know, treat the car with respect, that can run away with you. Overall though, I would say it's a reasonably forgiving car. Like I said, not quite as much as the Dodge, but not too far off. And personally, I'm happy with how it came out. Considering that we never had an official polyphony version of a Chevelle race car, I think it looks pretty good as a race car, and it's pretty convincing to drive as well, and it's certainly quick enough to pull it off. So that's it for the first build of the week. Of course, stick around for the other 9. I hope you enjoyed this one, and until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, thanks for watching.